Good evening, viewers. You are with us on Free Media, Free Minds, a television program that looks into contemporary South African media issues. You can find us on DSTV channel 263. This is Cape Town TV. In studio today, I have Bongi Khumalo, an incredible individual whose content and whose work is focused on women's issues, but she also happens to be a queer woman in South Africa. And the discussion today, we're looking into creative freedom and artistic freedom, in light of the recent ban or debate around the banning of the film Ingleba. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being here. So, I mean, the banning of that film created this huge debate around balancing, rights to protect culture, but also the right for our kind to exist, right? The first question that I really have, it has to do with just how do we balance that, the right to just exist and have our stories shared, and also with culture, because it's a sacred thing within South African society.
Well, yes. Culture is a very sacred thing, it's a very important thing, and it's a very necessary thing for any society, really, right?
Yeah.
We need culture because we need to know how to move on. We need culture because we need to know how, we need to feel secure, we need to feel secure in how we exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so at the same time as culture exists, culture also sort of silences a lot of bodies that don't directly fall in line with what culture has decided is the norm for human behavior, or for the norm for human existence.
Yeah.
And so as a queer person, or a bisexual, not all, but as a bisexual person.
You like being particular?
Yes, I like to be very particular. There's this constant negotiation of, in this moment, do I exist culturally or do I exist as myself? And so as an artist, as a person who produces stories, or a person who wants to tell stories, there's that constant negotiation that I have to be aware of. And that it makes life sort of difficult, because now I have to choose between being myself and existing and as myself, or to just letting the culture move forward, even though the culture can sometimes be very oppressive towards me. Or
I mean, I understand what you're saying completely. I do, and I sort of, I'm swayed by what you're saying, and I'm most likely to agree with you. However, one of the things that were constantly brought up by various parties who were quite kind of opposed to the film itself was that it was, we're not going to go into the film itself, but rather what it brings about in the South African society. We have a constitution that allows freedom of speech and freedom of thought and expression in many multiple ways. You have academics who can write about whatever they want to write about. But in my opinion, it would seem that the banning of the film also had to do with issues of masculinity, issues of gender, and where we are as a society. As a bisexual person, a woman, do you in your work find it difficult to constantly decide whether I should go with this? Would people understand this particular topic? But also, it's also connected to who you are.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, so just like at a first level, the banning of the movie, it tells you what our society, not what our society wants to accept, or what our society is ready for. I don't know if I'm saying that properly, but it just tells you what the society wants to hear and who the society wants to hear. Because certain stories are allowed to be aired, certain stories are allowed to exist, but certain stories are not. And that just tells you, if we just look at the structure of our society, where we came from and how we're moving. Yes, all of these things come from a masculinity complex, because we live in a patriarchal society. That's just it. Our society it's patriarchal, it's capitalist in nature, and so certain ideals are the ones that culturally we ought to focus on, so that you can move forward in this patriarchal agenda. Even though we are fighting against patriarchy, let's dismantle this, let's dismantle that, there's still an inherent patriarchy that we are protecting. in the society, and that patriarchy comes with a lot of masculinity that silences a whole lot of voices. So for me, I struggle with it a lot, because what am I allowed to speak about? What am I not allowed to speak about type of vibe? Even though I have freedom of speech, I still have to have that negotiation with me. I still have to have that conversation with myself every time. And that makes it difficult to put art out there.
With freedom of speech, right? There's a responsibility that is also enshrined in the Constitution, and you know it's said that you can express yourself, but you do not have to offend, maybe by perhaps advocating for hatred or exclusion, you know, in terms of gender, sexuality, and other ways. Like, talking about yourself, do you feel like you are being limited in terms of how you can exist in the world as an artist, artistically? Because I mean, it seems like it's going to take us so many years until we can be able to say, okay, we're going to talk about this, we're not going to talk about this.
Like, definitely. As an artist, yes. As a person, definitely. And so, for me, like, as I'm thinking about where we are, as I'm thinking about how far we have come in trying to move our society forward, right?
Yeah.
They say that we need to have a whole different imagination about our society. We need to imagine things differently in order for us to get to the next level of where we are supposed to be or where we are supposed to be going, right? And so it's important for me to push, to be like, yay, okay, this thing, they don't want to hear about it because it's a kind of truth that stings the ear, but you have to do it because that's important.
I want you to hold that thought, or whatever that you were going to say. We're going to quickly go to the ad break. You still with us, Free Media, Free Minds, program that looks into contemporary South African media issues. We'll be back right after the break. Welcome back to the show. My name is Mpondaba. You are with us on Free Media, Free Minds, a television program that looks into contemporary South African media issues. Today we're discussing artistic freedom and freedom of speech, but looking at in line with the banning of the film Ingleba. In studio today I have Bongi Khumalo. She's a creative, and she happens to be a queer person as well, particularly a bisexual person, you know, because she likes me to mention that. But also, you know, it's a side conversation that you don't want to be known as that because you're more than that. But anyway, the point that I wanted the question that I have now really is, you know, in your work, do you find it difficult to talk about, you know, of course you happen to be a queer woman, but in terms of the other side, like, you know, the fact that you have had relations with other women, do you think people are open to hearing about those kinds of stories, or they just like, okay, talk about this one, we're more comfortable with this one?
It's a very interesting question, but definitely, because when I write, I make it. I don't feel the need to make these grand announcements that, listen, I am bisexual. But in my stories, you will definitely you will find how I've related with women and how I've related with men. Funny enough, in the feedback that I get, nobody goes over that. Nobody asks about the relationships that I've had with women. People are more concerned with the relationships that I've had with men. And I feel like that's probably how they want me to structure my content, but I'm not about that life, so I'm going to keep. It's difficult though. It's difficult because now there's this sort of like I am distancing an audience from myself, from me, if I decide to be myself, because people are not ready to hear that.
Because I mean the question really, and many of you might wonder why is this question important. I think it's important because it links to also, you know, when the film was banned, it was all Nakane, for example, who stars in the film, had collaborated with DJ Black Coffee, and like during December everyone was just having fun, and like we were enjoying the music that they produced together. But when the film came out, he was no longer that person whom we were happy about. So it's almost like we are being told, or we are being told that you can only exist in this form, and not going, beyond this particular line, which is why I'm asking, like, that your audience would only be, kind of responsive only when coming to just that other aspect of you and not others.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what that's about. I do know what that's about. I mean, we look at our society and then we see how we're interacting with straight individuals, how we're interacting with bi individuals, how we're interacting with straight relations, straight sexual relations, and how we want to perceive the other side, as you're calling it. I mean, it's a lot because if I were to thinking about what I have written and all of the things that I have said and put out there, there is still no negotiation with my bisexual identity. And I don't want to problematize that because maybe somehow we've moved to a point where we've accepted it, but I don't think that's the truth of it. I think people really just want to gloss over it because they do not want to imagine me as someone that can be bisexual. Like it's sort of like it taints the image of me because now I'm existing on this other side, which is a very strange thing that all queer artists have to deal with. Like that's why a coming out moment is so intense, especially for an artist. Especially for somebody that exists out there, because now you are negotiated differently. Now people, when they look at you, they don't see Mpo anymore. They see, okay,
he's bisexual.
He's bi. Let's change the channel because he's doing all of these funny things. Like,
so okay. Does that then mean that you have artists? And I mean, it's not that we've had stories, but I know people who in the industry who are. Whose lifestyles are like mine, they are queer, but they choose not to speak about it because of what it might mean, for their work. So the question really is, do you then think that artists, choose to only reveal certain parts of who they are in fear that society has not moved with the times?
Yeah, I definitely think that's a factor in what we choose to put out there and what we don't choose and what we choose to hide type of vibe. I mean, privacy is a very important thing, and everybody is entitled to their own privacy. Everybody's entitled to what they want to put out there. I mean, if we're looking at social media and we're looking at how people are curating lives on social media, people choose specifically what they want the other person to see or what they want the rest of the world to see. And that is perfectly okay. That is fine, right? And so for an artist or for a person that wants to exist in a world where other people are constantly looking in, or where other people constantly have to make commentary in order for you to eat, it's a whole different thing.
You have to choose
because you have to negotiate really carefully. Because do I go this way, the way that is unfavorable to everybody, and risk the fact that I might have dinner tonight? Or do I just give them what they want? Just give them the aspects of my personality that they are okay with, so that life can move on. And then in that we have to think about what impact does this have on the culture? Because if the culture stays the same, the society stays the same. We are dealing with the same things over and over. And yes, again, in 20 what and what, we're going to still have like a board that says, my parents went through this in 2018, my parents still dealt with the same thing. Because we are so determined to keep that culture the same way.
I want you to hold that thought. We're going to quickly take an ad break. You're still with us on Cape Town TV, channel 260 on DSTV. We'll be back. Welcome back to the show. You are still with me, Mpondaba. We're in Cape Town TV, channel 260 on DSTV. This is Free Media, Free Minds, a television program that looks into contemporary South African media issues. I still have Bongi Khumalo, who is a creative, and we're talking about artistic freedom and freedom of speech, and particularly in line with the banning of the film Ingleba. So Bongi, in this last segment of the show, what I want us to focus on is the way forward. How do we ensure that everyone is happy? How do we ensure that you can be able to write and produce content and feel affirmed in your existence, but at the same time, people who feel offended with certain writings that you might produce are happy. Like, how do we balance both, needs? Because it seems like it's an issue where we're just not hearing each other, or we're not even willing to come together and say, okay, this is who I am. You can be yourself, but we can still find a way to move forward as a society.
So it's a very, not that it's a difficult question, it has a lot to think about, has a lot of weight. Because for one, we need to be real with ourselves. If we want the society to change, if we want things to be different, we're gonna have to dismantle the way that they are right now, which is a very radical thing. We need to, all of the systems that are keeping us in place, we need to break them down. We need to break down capitalism because it operates on a system of hierarchy, which is inherently like, it excludes inherently type of vibe. It's based on a superiority, inferiority, workings, whatever. And so that's capitalism. Patriarchy, it's the same thing. So if we want things to be different, if we want our society to change, we actually need to be open, or not even to be open, to actually change it, because we can't be the people who say, listen, we need free education, but at the same time, we will go to work every day to go and work for this company that perpetuates this kind of, this kind of abuse of people who do not have access to education. Do you understand? So we need to be real with ourselves, and we need to actually sit down and say, we want things to be different. It's going to be difficult. We need to look at the way that we are organizing our lives, because currently we're running our lives based on a capitalist system that disadvantages so many people. And in that disadvantage come situations of cultural formation that oppresses other beings. So we need to be straight up about this if we actually want to see the different world. Because to move in the way that we're currently moving, yes, maybe we can be soft about it, but how long is that going to take? How many more years are we going to wait and just wait for things to be different? It doesn't work out. That means in my lifetime, I'll never see fairness. I'll never see equality. That's what it means. So we need to be real. Do we want this or not?
Look, I mean, there's also sentimental value around things that have always existed in society. You do not simply let go of what has always been there. Do you think there's a room for modifying, perhaps also putting limitation in terms of you being queer? Don't be too queer. And in terms of culture, perhaps there's modifications that could come into place in terms of just saying that, okay, you can exist, but maybe to this extent. Because I mean, at this point, it's the banning, the film could have allowed alternative debates and nuanced perspectives, but it wasn't allowed. I think it could have it would have had a different impact in terms of the kind of ideas and debates that could have come out of the film. It was just now about just culture, this conflict between culture and queerness. But I do think that if it was allowed for everyone to see, and it could have moved us in a different direction.
I know you're the host of the show, but I have a question. How? Allowed how? In what way?
I don't know.
That's the exact thing. Say for instance, if you were to exist in the 1960s maybe, and then in South Africa, and then you are speaking to a white man, and then you're like, this thing must change, and then the white man is like, listen, this thing has been here in our society. Maybe there's a different way we can have a conversation, a different way for you to be black, so that we can maybe do you understand?
You put me in this.
I
completely understand what you're saying.
Why? How? It's problematic. It needs to be different. That's it. That's the bottom line. Why do I have to nurse you through this thing that you can obviously see is wrong?
There's also an interesting episode of that airs on Mzansi Magic. I think it was centered around this polygamous queer relationship with a traditional doctor. They reside in Limpopo, and it was about they are in a relationship. It's 3 gay men, 4 of them, because he has 3 partners and it's himself, and he's a traditional healer who happens to be also a pastor, you know. So like those kinds of things, like where culture is challenged, things that have always been static and like crystallized and like very, you know, affirmed, are being challenged within South African society. Talk us, you know, with like talk about your show, your show. I know you have work that you produce, and also your writing. How can people access your work, you know, to also know more? If there's questions that you have, you can also get through to our guest. You know, talk us through that.
Okay, so my work is based on sex and sexuality.
Yeah.
So I have conversations with black women about sex, because that is a conversation that we're not having in our society. As black women, we don't speak about sex. We don't speak about sex at home. We don't know what to do with sex.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, we find ourselves in situations where we're sexually compromised, but we do not have the language to assert ourselves and to assert, you know, to assert who we are and what we want and what we prefer, what we think is right for us. So we don't have that language because we don't nurture it at home, and we don't have spaces that nurture that kind of language. And that's what I'm doing with my platform. I have this platform where black women are engaging. I and a few others are engaging on sexuality and sexual content and how we feel and what the positive way is for us to move forward in our society. I mean, black women are going through a lot these days. I mean, we are going through a lot. Black women in South Africa are being killed. Black women in South Africa are being raped, and most of these situations are happening with our partners that we consider like our intimate places, you know. And I think I have this theory that because we are not negotiating these intimate spaces, the people that we're engaging with do not have the language, they don't understand.
Okay, so how can people get hold of that?
You can get hold of me as Black Thighs channel on YouTube, and then also on WordPress, so www.blackthighs@wordpress.com.
Okay, so we've come to the end of the show. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Mpondaba. You can also ask questions on Twitter using the hashtag #FreeMediaFreeMinds. 4, digit 4 at the end. But thank you for being with us. Until next time.
I have studied the